Okay, you can start now.
Greetings of the day, everyone. I am privileged to welcome you all onto the first children's edition of Orange City Literature Festival, organized by SGR Knowledge Foundation in association with GH Raisoni University, powered by Raisoni Groups of Institutions. The motive behind the fest is to explore the ways that should help students develop emotional intelligence. Exposing children to quality literature can contribute to the creation of responsible, successful, and caring individuals. Have you ever thought of the stories of mysterious people, their styles and objects in Indian art from the prehistoric period to the present day, and in the process? In this art of the day, the section is about the book that captures some of the diversity and range of very large canvas we call Indian art with Mamta Nair. Our speaker can give us better understanding about it. But before, let me introduce Ma'am. Mamta Nani is a children's writer, editor, and translator based in New Delhi. She spent some years in advertising before an apple fell on her head while she was sitting under a mango tree. And she had her eureka moment. She has been writing for children since then. She has authored many books for children, including A Brush with Indian Art, which won the Hindu Young World Good Books Award 2019 in the Best Book Nonfiction category. So, without wasting a minute, I would like to hand over the session to Ma'am.
Thank you so much, Uraida. Thank you for having me, and I'm very thrilled to be a part of the Orange City Literary Festival and talk to you about my newest book, which is called 10 Indian Art Mysteries That Have Never Been Solved. As the title suggests, the book is about the mysteries in Indian art, and it delves deep into the mysteries behind some of the greatest works of Indian art and its creators. So, what is interesting about Indian art is that it's the visual side of history. So it's very exciting. It's just not about dusty dates or arcane concepts or schools or movements. It is very intriguing. It is full of stories and mysteries. In fact, a large part of Indian art history is like a thriller. So you'll find a lot of intriguing characters in Indian art. You'll find a lot of like these accidental finds, buried treasures, cryptic clues in some of the paintings. So this makes Indian art very exciting and interesting. And some of this excitement we have tried to capture in this book. And since it's a session which is about 40 minutes long, I would not be able to talk about all the mysteries that are there in the book, but I'll try and talk to you about a couple of them. And I would like to begin by telling you a very interesting story, which is a story about this very interesting man whose name is Dr. Vishnu Sridhar Vakankar. Okay, let me show you a picture of him. So he's that man, and he was a very famous archaeologist. And not a very long time ago, the year I think was 1957, and he was once traveling from Bhopal to Itarsi. So there are these two places in Madhya Pradesh. One is called Bhopal. Of course, we all know about Bhopal. And there's this another place called Itarsi. So once Dr. Vakankar was traveling by train from Bhopal to Itarsi, and luckily he got a window seat and he was just gazing out of the window, and something caught his attention, okay? So what caught his attention? There was a series of low forested hills that he saw, and his archaeological antenna kind of started twitching. And why his archaeological antenna started twitching? Because there were rocks which were jutting out of these hills in unusual shapes, as if they were hewn by a giant hammer. So he was deeply interested to find out what these rocks were. But before he could decide what he should do, the train had just moved on. So acting purely on his instinct, he got down at the next station and he went back to these hills to examine them. Okay, so these are the kind of hills that he found. When he went back and he examined them, he found these hills, very rock shelters, very interesting, and he looked at them carefully. So the first rock shelter that he wanted to look at the underside of some of these rock shelters, and the first rock shelter that he entered into, he saw that there was beautiful drawings of stick-figured humans and these very recognizable animals. And Dr. Wakankar was completely stunned when this realization sort of dawned upon him, that he was not standing in front of something which was drawn very recently. He was standing in front of these drawings which were made many, many years ago. He realized that these drawings actually belong to the prehistoric era. Okay, these drawings were from the Stone Age. And he was very excited with this find because he realized that these are some of the oldest paintings in the Indian subcontinent. Okay, so now what Dr. Wakankar did was that what usually archaeologists do, they start excavating the site, they start researching the site, they see like what kind of drawings are there or what kind of objects are there. So he started excavating the site, he put together a team and he excavated the site for 16 long years. And you know what he found? He found some 750 rock shelters in the radius of about 10 kilometers of this place, out of which 500 held these wonderful, wonderful prehistoric paintings. He also found some stone tools, and after researching these stone tools and these drawings, he found out that people who belong to some 100,000 years ago to 3,000 years ago had made this place their home, these rock shelters their home. Okay, and this place that he had discovered is called Bhimbetka. And the legend goes that this place actually gets its name from Bhim, the second Pandav Bhim. We all know the story of Mahabharata. So there are these two warring cousins, the Kauravas and the Pandavas. So it is believed when the Kauravas kind of banished the Pandavas out of their kingdom, the second Pandav, Bhim, kind of took refuge in these rock shelters, and he spent his time in these rock shelters, and that's why it's called Bhimbetka, Bhim ki Baithak, the seat of Bhim. So that's why it is named Bhimbetka. Okay, so now this is basically about Bhimbetka, but that also brings us to the big question: why did the early humans, the people from Stone Age, created these rock paintings or cave paintings? So the early archaeologists actually believed that they created these paintings because they thought that it was something like a hunting magic. Okay, so they believed that the early humans drew the animals that they wanted to capture. So it was almost like they wanted to manifest their hunting dream on the wall of their caves, on the walls of their caves, so that next day, almost by some divine sorcery, they will be able to capture that animal. So for example, if they drew a bison or a boar on a wall of a cave, next day they'll get that bison or a boar to hunt. But many modern archaeologists believe that cave paintings are actually much more than hunting magic. Okay, there could be a million and more reasons as to why they created these paintings. Some archaeologists believe that they drew their hunting strategies on the wall. Okay, some believe that this was a way for them to communicate. They wanted to tell their stories through visuals, like how we do. Now we have all these emojis, and we kind of try and communicate our feelings through these emojis. So visuals are also language, right? So a lot of the archaeologists believe that they wanted to tell their stories through these drawings. Some believe that these were like just some spontaneous doodles. Okay, doodling is a very basic human instinct, right? You're getting bored in a classroom and you draw something on the margin of your notebook, a flower or a leaf, right? So some archaeologists believe that these were they didn't think too much about it, and these were actually very spontaneous sort of doodles that they tried to make on the walls of their caves. They didn't have anything by the way of entertainment. They didn't have video games, they didn't have phones, they didn't have TV. So just to entertain themselves, they created these paintings. Some also believe that these could be wall ornamentations, like how we decorate our houses with wall hangings and paintings and whatnot. So they also, because caves were their homes, right? So they also wanted to decorate their caves, and that's why they started to create these paintings. But the exact reason, there could be many more reasons as to why they created these paintings, but we do not know the exact reason of the early humans making these paintings. Okay, but one thing is for sure, that all these people, and not just in India, all around the world, the prehistoric people, their favorite subject for their drawings and paintings were animals. And in Bhimbetka also, you find a lot of animals drawn on the walls of the caves, on these rock shelters. Yeah, and here, for example, if you look at my screen, you can see that there are lot many animals which are grouped together on this rock. This rock is called the Zoo Rock. It is in Bhimbetka, and you can see many different kinds. You can see a cow, you can see a deer, you can see an elephant, you can see a monkey. So there are all these different animals which are grouped together on a rock, which is very appropriately called the Zoo Rock. Yeah, imagine an entire zoo on a single rock. And in Bhimbetka, you can actually find 29 different species of animals which are drawn on these rock shelters. And it's not just the animals, there are humans also which are drawn in Bhimbetka, but humans are usually drawn as stick figures. If you've seen Worldly art, you know what I mean. Okay, so humans are drawn as stick figures, while the animals are drawn more realistically. And some animals are also drawn with a kind of an X-ray vision. So, for example, there's this cow in Bhimbetka that has 2 babies inside its belly. There's also the skeleton of a horse that you can find in one of the paintings. So from this, we can make out that the early humans were kind of familiar with the anatomy of the animals because they hunted the animals. They knew how the insides of the animals looked. But that also brings us to the question, why did they make the humans as stick figures, which is an abstraction of a realistic sort of a human, and animals more realistically? So why there are these two styles which are merging in prehistoric art? So that is again a mystery of prehistoric art. Okay, right at the entrance of the Bhimbetka caves, there's this cave which has this rock which is called the Auditorium Rock. And this rock, what is so special about this rock is that it has, if you can see, there are holes in this rock, right? So there are these cup-shaped depressions on the surface of this auditorium rock. So the early humans actually scooped out the surface and made these holes. And archaeologists believe that they did this because of some sort of a ritualistic reason. But we don't know what that ritual was. So why did they do that? Why did they scoop out this rock surface? We have no clue. Okay, so some of the most extraordinary paintings that you find in Bhimbetka are of these dancers. So if you look at it, you will be reminded of the Worli folk art that we have, that is very common in Maharashtra. So here also you can see that there are these stick figures which are strung together in these long rows, and they're all dancing. Okay, so these the drawings of these dancers kind of give us the earliest evidence of dance and music in the prehistoric era, right? Okay, so now many painters from different eras kind of used rock shelters as their canvases. So the earlier paintings, since many people kind of made these shelters their home from the early prehistoric era to the Mesolithic era, which is the middle part of the Stone Age. So we find many layers of paintings one on top of the other in Bhimbetka. So while the early paintings kind of show animals and hunting scenes and dancers, the later paintings show us a more settled way of life. So here, if you see, like, there's this big procession that is going on. There are also paintings of armored men. There are also paintings of horse-drawn chariots in Bhimbetka. So from this, we can assume that these were made much before the earlier paintings were made, when a more settled way of life had begun. But what is interesting is that these later painters did not erase the paintings which were done before by the earlier artists. They created their paintings on top of the paintings that were already there. So why did they do that? Like, if you want to use a blackboard and there's something written on the blackboard, you would erase it first, right, before writing something on the blackboard. But these people who came after the initial artists, the early artists, they did not erase their drawings. They drew on top of that. So what was the reason for them to do that? So that is again a very big mystery of prehistoric art. And there's a lot, of course, that we know about prehistoric art, but there's also a lot that we do not know. So, for example, we know that that early humans created these paintings, but who was that first person who created the first prehistoric painting? And what was the inspiration behind him or her to create that painting? So we don't have an answer to that. Yeah, we know that they use natural colors to make these ancient doodles. They derived colors from plants and minerals and rocks. But how did they arrive at the invention of those colors? We don't have an answer to that. Right? At what point in history did our early humans actually have a fully developed minds with imaginations to create something like this? We don't have an answer to that. So a lot about prehistory is also a big, big mystery, right? Okay, so now what I'm going to show, I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a picture, and I'm sure you will all know whose picture that is. Okay, so here's the picture. We all know that it's a picture of Gautam Buddha, right? But if I were to ask you, did Gautam Buddha actually look like this? What would you say? Yes, no, maybe? Well, surprise, surprise. Till about 600 years after Gautam Buddha's death, no image, no idol, no sculpture of Buddha was ever created. Okay, why, you might wonder? Because so there are two theories that kind of explain this. Some historians believe that Gautam Buddha did not want his image or sculpture or painting to be created because he wanted people to just follow his teachings. Okay, he didn't want people to concentrate so much on him, the physical embodiment of him. He wanted people to kind of follow his teachings of non-violence and compassion. So he did not want people to make his image, his idol. He didn't want them to worship his idol. So he didn't want his image to be created. And some other historians sort of believe that the early followers of the Buddha thought that Buddha was a divine being, and they believe that divine beings should not be limited to or defined by their physical forms. Okay, because they are actually much, much bigger than their physical forms. So they thought that we would not define the great Buddha in a physical sort of a form, and we won't make his images. So what they did instead was they used these symbols wherever they wanted to depict the great Buddha. They used symbols to represent them. Okay, just how if you look at India's flag, the Tiranga, you know that Tiranga represents India, right? So similarly, the early Buddhists, the early followers of the Buddha, also created these symbols to depict the Buddha. So now, what were these symbols? So, for example, this is a panel from the Sachi Stupa, and on the left-hand side, you can actually see a symbol. So it's a symbol of the empty throne. Okay, we all know that Buddha was a prince. His name was Prince Siddharth, and he kind of left his kingdom and all the luxuries of life to kind of pursue his spiritual quest. So here we can see that there's an empty throne, which kind of denotes that he left all the luxuries of life to pursue his spiritual quest. There's actually also a story behind this. It is believed that there was this demon called Mara, who tried to lure Prince Siddharth with all the luxuries of life, but Prince Siddharth, Gautam Buddha, actually did not give in, and he left the kingdom. So that is what is depicted in this panel in Sachi Stupa. And here you can see that there's a symbol that is there to kind of depict Gautam Buddha, and that symbol is of the empty throne. Here, for example, this is another panel, and here you can see a Bodhi tree. So Bodhi tree is the tree under which Buddha gained enlightenment. He got enlightened, he gained enlightenment. So that's why there is the symbol of the Bodhi tree. Here, for example, you can see the Dharma Chakra, which kind of represents the teachings of the Buddha of non-violence and compassion. Yeah, so in a lot of places, you'll find in a lot of like these Buddhist sites, you'll also find the Dharma Chakra. The lions, for example, they kind of depict the courage that one needs to follow the spiritual path. So you'll find a lot of the images of the lions also. You'll also find white elephants, 6-tusked white elephants, because it is believed that when Buddha was supposed to be born, before that, his mother Maya actually got a dream of a white elephant. So these are some of the symbols that kind of depict Gautam Buddha. But now we come to this question that if for the longest time if these were the symbols that were being used to depict the Buddha, the image of the Buddha that we are so familiar with. So, for example, we know that Buddha wore this off-shouldered robe. He had curly hair. He had this top knot. He had these lotus-shaped eyes, long earlobes. So now we come to the question: how did this image? From where did this image come? Like, if symbols were being used, how did we arrive at this image? So the answer to this question is that we came to this image with the coming of this great king called King Kanishk. He belonged to the Kushan Empire. And when he spread his empire in the Indian subcontinent, that's his empire was a big empire, a huge empire that stretched from Afghanistan to Patliputra. And he was actually from Central Asia. So this is the only surviving sculpture of King Kanishk that we have. It is headless, I know, but he wears this long coat and these big boots, and he has a sword. So from this, we can assume that he came from a much colder place, and he came to India and he spread his empire here. And he was the one who actually introduced the idea of putting the images of the king and the gods on the coins that were being made during his time. So, for example, this is one of the coins, and you can see that there's this image of him on the left hand side, and there's this image of Gautam Buddha on the right hand side. But again, like, how did, since nobody had anything by way of references, because there was no image of the Buddha ever created, how did he come to this image of the Buddha? So there's this very interesting story about it. So basically, when King Kanishk stretched his empire in the Indian subcontinent, he formed Gandhar, which is in present-day Afghanistan, as his capital. So Gandhar was a place which was right at the center of the Silk Route. It was actually a bridge between the East and the West. Okay, so a lot of artists and a lot of craftsmen from Central Asia, from Greece and Rome, actually came to Gandhar and met with the artist from India. Okay, and in fact, it is said that Kanishk actually commissioned some of these painters to create the image of the Buddha. Now, these painters had no idea whatsoever of how the Buddha actually looked. Okay, but these painters and craftsmen were very familiar with the Greco-Roman art. Okay, they were very used to, they knew and practiced that sort of an art. So they were a smart lot. So what they did was they took some features from the Greco-Roman art world and they merged it with some of the characters that were mentioned in the Buddhist scriptures of the Buddha. Okay, in Buddhist scripture, it says that there are 32 different characters that all great men should have. Okay, and what are these characters? Some of these characters are long earlobes, a dot on the forehead, a top knot, okay, long sweeping arms. So they used features from the Greco-Roman art and they infused them with some of these characters that were written in the Buddhist scriptures, and they created an image of the Buddha. So, for example, if you see some of these sculptures, these are some Greek and Roman sculptures. So these artists actually used the long robe that the Buddha wears. So it is called toga. This is the Roman toga. So they used this Roman toga in the image, in the sculpture of the Buddha that they created. These very athletic bodies that some of the Greek gods have, right? The curly long hair, the halo, for example. A lot of Greek gods have halo behind them. So they use these characters and they merged it with the characters of the Buddha that were mentioned in the Buddhist scriptures, and they had an image of the Buddha. Isn't it a very fascinating story? I absolutely love this story. Okay, but that brings us to the question that if Buddha actually did not look anything like this, then what did the real Buddha look like? Was he tall? Was he short? Was he plump? Was he thin? Did he have long hair? Did he have short hair? Did he have beard, or was he clean shaven? So actually, we have no idea how the real Buddha looked. Your guess is just as good or bad as mine. Okay, but some of the Buddhist scriptures say that the great Buddha actually looked like a very ordinary monk. There's also this story that goes that King Ajat Chatru of Magad actually wanted to meet the Buddha, and he went to meet him. And there was this group of monks who were there when Ajatashatru went there, and he could not tell the Buddha apart from all the other monks. So he actually had to ask Gautam Buddha's physician Jivaka to tell him who the Buddha was. So it is believed that Gautam Buddha was actually a very ordinary looking man. Okay, so this is the story of the great Buddha. Now we come to the next mystery. I'll show you a picture of a very famous temple. Okay, so this is this temple, and it is in Ellora in Aurangabad, Maharashtra. And this temple is called the Kailash Nath Temple. It is a Shiva temple. So it represents the Himalayan abode of Lord Shiva, Mount Kailash. And that's why it is called the Kailash Nath Temple. So what is interesting about this temple? So what is interesting about this temple is that it's a monolith. Now, what is a monolith? A monolith is a structure, a building or a monument that is not built. It is not built with stones or bricks. A monolith is something that is created, that is cut and carved out of a single piece of rock or mountain. Okay, so just imagine how much time and effort it would have taken ancient architects and sculptors to create this multi-storied sort of a temple complex. This temple has, by the way, 3 stories. It has a terrace, it has underground passages, it has bridges that connects one part to the other. Here, if you see, and every inch of this temple is decorated with carvings. There are so many sculptures in this temple. See, here in this slide, you can see that there's one part of the temple which is connected to the other with a bridge. So it is a very complex structure. Okay, and that's only one part of the Kailash Nath story. Okay, there's another part which is even more fascinating. And that is that this temple was built from top to bottom and not the other way around. Okay, usually almost all monuments or buildings are built from bottom to top. You first build the foundation and you build the structure on that foundation. But here it was built from top to bottom. Now, what does that mean? This top-down approach kind of leaves very little leeway for making mistakes. Okay, every design element, every measurement has to be absolutely perfect, because if you cut something, you can't really change it. It's a monolith after all. Okay, and sure enough, no mistakes were made when this temple was created. It is a work of absolute perfection. Yeah. But then that might make you wonder, why did the architects create this from top to bottom, and they could have easily created it from bottom to top? So now there is this very interesting story that goes back to 8th century CE. It is believed that there was this king called King Danti Durga. Okay, he ruled these parts of the country. He belonged to the Rashtrakuta dynasty that ruled central and southern India. And it is believed that once he fell severely ill. Okay, so all the doctors and all the physicians of his kingdom were summoned, and they were asked to treat the king, but they said they couldn't figure out what his illness was. So they couldn't provide any sort of remedy for the king. Okay, and they told the queen, king's wife, her name was Queen Elu. So they told the queen that they saw no hope for the king, and the king might not survive for long. Okay, so the queen was very, very disappointed, and she was a great devotee. She was a very, very staunch devotee of Lord Shiva. So she thought that there's no other option. So she started praying to Lord Shiva, and for long hours each day, she prayed and prayed to Lord Shiva. And she decided that if my husband gets well, I'll build a temple to Lord Shiva's name, and this temple would be fashioned like Mount Kailash, the Himalayan abode of Lord Shiva. And she said, and she took a vow saying that I won't eat anything until I see the peak of this temple, the shikhar of this temple. And when she said that, very miraculously, the king started getting better. So that's the story. Okay. So the king started getting better, and then she had to fulfill her vow. She had to create this temple. So again, like all the architects of the kingdom were summoned, and they decided on this huge, huge basalt rock in Ellora, and they decided that they'll cut and carve this rock into a temple. But then, much to their horror, the king and the queen suddenly realized that if they build this temple from bottom to top, it would take years and years for the peak to appear, for the shikhar to appear. And the queen will starve off to death if she waited for the peak to appear. So what do they do now? So they asked all the architects that they had for some sort of a solution. Nobody was able to provide them with any solution. But there was this one architect whose name was Kokasa. Okay, he came up with the solution. He said, if we start building this temple from top to bottom, I can make the peak appear, I can make the shikhar appear in a week's time. So the queen can fast for a week, and she can look at the peak, and then she can break her fast. Okay, and that's exactly what they did. They started building the temple from top to bottom. And though the shikhar of the temple appeared in a few days, but the entire temple is believed to have been completed in several generations of Rashtrakuta kings. And it is believed when the temple got completed after many years, it is written in one of the inscriptions on one of the walls of the temple that the celestial beings, the heavenly beings who were looking at this temple from the skies, they were awestruck by how magnificent and how enormous this temple was. And even the architects who had built this temple, the architects and the sculptors who had built this temple, they could not believe that they were the ones who had created it. Has it ever happened to you that you create something and you just can't believe that you are the one who has created it? So something like that happened to them. And it is believed that this structure is beyond human capacity to be built. A lot of like these alien theorists say that they had alien help. They had help from aliens. Some say they had some sort of a divine help. There's no evidence, obviously, to prove that. But one does wonder that how did people who lived so many years ago build something like this, which is so technologically advanced? So I told you that there are these underground passages, there are tunnels, there are these bridges that are there in this temple. So how did they build something like this with very, very simple tools? Archaeologists believe that the only tools that they had was hammer and chisel and picks and their bare hands. So how could they create something which is so complex with just these very, very simple tools? Also, they didn't have rock cutters, right? So how did they cut the rock? Yeah, and how did they manage to not cause the rock to snap while they were chiseling away at the rock? Okay, and if they wanted to kind of fashion a rock into a temple, why didn't they choose something which was softer, like a limestone or sandstone, instead of this super hard rock? So these are some of the questions that still remain unanswered about the Kailashnath temple. Okay, so these were this, for example, is one of the panels that they have in Kailashnath. It is the Mahabharata panel, and then there's also this Ramayana. So you can see like how beautifully they've made these carvings, and they're so detailed, right? So how did they manage to do this without having like these very, very modern sort of tools? Also, there's another mystery about this. Like they carved this entire rock. So what happened? They chiseled away the rock. So what happened to all the quarried rock that came with the chiseling of the rock? So because in the vicinity you can't find the rock remains of this mountain that was used to build the Kailashnath temple. So these are some of the very interesting mysteries, and I spoke to you about only 3 of the mysteries that are there in the book. There are 7 more mysteries in the book, so you can read the book, you can look at the pictures of the art pieces that are there in the book, you can do your own research, you can ferret out the facts, and then you can come to your own conclusions. Okay, and I really hope that you enjoy reading the book and you find out more about Indian art and some great pieces of Indian art.
So I have some questions for you. You wrote a book on 10 Indian art mysteries that have never been solved. How have you thought about this? I mean, how do you come up with the idea for the book?
Okay, so when I was in school, which was a very, very long time ago, and unfortunately things haven't changed much over the years. But when we had our drawing classes and our art classes, they were usually drawing classes. So the teacher would ask us to draw something and we would just draw that, and that was about it. They were more like 3 periods. Okay, art history wasn't really explored as a part of human history, a very visual and exciting part of human history. Okay, so many years later, when I was in college and I got deeply interested in art, and I started reading up a lot about art, I found out that there are so many stories and so many ideas that are there as a part of the Indian art history. And then when I started writing for children, I felt this compelling need to kind of talk to children, to expose them to this wealth of stories that we have in Indian art. So that's how I came upon this idea to kind of acquaint them to all these mysteries that we have in Indian art, and to give them a more comprehensive idea of what Indian art is, and to help them kind of dig deep into the various layers that we have in the history of Indian art. So I think that's how I arrived at the idea of doing this book. Of course, I've done one which is on the history of Indian art, which is called A Brush with Indian Art, and this is the second one on the mysteries of Indian art.
I am very intrigued to read about left out seven mysteries. Okay,
I
so
hope you buy the book and read it.
yes, ma'am.
I would just like to plug it in. The book is available in all the bookstores where books are sold, and you'll get some extra love from me if you buy it from your local bookstore. So do buy the book, read it, and tell me how you
So
find
much,
it.
so much. So, what was the process of research like?
So the research was kind of painstaking. Like I've been researching about art for quite a long time, but the active research on this particular book I think began about 2.5 years ago. So I a lot of like reading and museum visits and gallery visits and all those sort of things. But because I'm very invested in the subject really fascinates me. So it was a very enjoyable experience. Uh, but I would like to mention that if research was one thing, verifying all the facts was quite another. So after the initial research was done, each fact that we have in the book needed to be referenced and cross-referenced and rechecked, and so that was kind of exhausting. But I would say overall it was a very enjoyable experience.
Okay. So, I wanted to ask, like, for something that's essentially non-fiction, the text is very chatty and conversation. So, was this a deliberate decision?
Yes, it was. I think the basic idea for doing this book was to make art accessible to children, to present it in a format that they would want to buy it into. So I didn't want to do a book which is full of state facts. So that's why I took mysteries that kind of interested me, and I wanted to present it in a way that would engage young audiences. So that's why I chose a tone which is chatty and conversational. So, but I would like to confess that sometimes I kind of overstepped that fine line between being chatty and conversational to being patronizing, and that's where my editors kind of rose the red flag, saying no, this is not working, and then I had to tone it down. But that was the whole attempt. I wanted to make it something that children would want to engage with. So yeah, that's why this sort of a
Okay.
tone was.
Okay. Lastly, Mom, I just want to know, like, how did you arrive at the 10 mysteries that are in the book?
With great difficulty, yes. So it was a daunting task because there's so many stories and mysteries in Indian art. So it was very difficult to kind of come down to these 10 mysteries. But I wanted to do those mysteries that kind of tell a comprehensive stories of a comprehensive history of Indian art. So I wanted stories that belong to different eras. So that was the basic attempt. So first, what I did was I put together these small little notes of the kind of mysteries that interested me. Then I made a master list of all the epochs that I wanted to cover. And then I mixed and matched and developed the chapters around these 10. But I think it totally calls for a sequel. Like there are so many mysteries that easily one more book could be done on the mysteries of Indian art. Yeah.
Guys, we'll wait for the sequel as well now. Okay.
I hope
So-
this happens.
Yeah. If you permit, that was all from my side. If you permit, should I just conclude the session now?
Sure, please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am. It was pleasure being a part of this session, and it will be great pleasure to read this book. Our audience can get their copies of the book from the links provided in the description or visit the Crossword store in their city. The session was supported by Penguin Publication. You can get the copy from Penguin website as well. A must-read book for the generation today. Wish you happy reading. I once again thank you, ma'am, and audience in front of the systems. Get ready for the quiz based on this session and visit www.oclfnagpur.com to participate in a quiz and win exciting gifts and prizes. A gigantic Orange City Literature Festival will be back in November 2022 in Nagpur, the city of oranges. Get ready for the physical fest in the coming winter, attending awesome sessions and interacting with your favorite author. Keep following us for the updates. With this, I, Uraida Nawab, sign off.
Thank you so much, Uraida. I had a lovely
Thank
time
you,
talking to you.
ma'am. Same here, ma'am. Thank you so much.